The reluctant groom. Zane Axton stood stiffly in front of the floor-to-ceiling window of his quarters, his gaze fixed on the alien cityscape sprawling before him. The towering spires and arching bridges of the Xixian capital glittered under the soft light of the twin moons, a breathtaking sight that would have normally filled him with wonder. But tonight, the beauty was lost on him, his mind preoccupied with the gravity of his impending mission. As a seasoned diplomat for the Interstellar Human Alliance, Zane had faced his fair share of challenges. He'd negotiated trade agreements with the insectoid Crix, mediated border disputes between the warring factions of the Galthuri Confederacy, and even brokered a peace treaty with the notorious pirate clans of the Outer Rim. But nothing in his illustrious career had prepared him for this, an arranged marriage with an alien princess. The Xixians were a proud and ancient race, their civilization predating humanity's first ventures into space by millennia. With their lithe, elongated bodies, iridescent skin, and large, almond-shaped eyes, they were a striking sight to behold. But it was their advanced technology and vast network of alliances that had caught the attention of Earth's leaders. An alliance with the Xixians would provide a much-needed boost to humanity's standing in the galactic community. And so, Zane found himself here, on the eve of his wedding to Princess Stara, a woman he'd never met. He knew little about her, save for the whispered rumors that she was considered far from attractive by human standards. But as a diplomat, Zane understood that appearances were often deceiving, and that true strength lay in the power of the mind and the heart. A chime at the door pulled him from his thoughts. "Enter," he called out, turning to face his visitor. The door slid open, revealing a tall, slender Xixian dressed in the ornate robes of a royal attendant. "Mr. Axton," the attendant said, bowing deeply. "Princess Stara requests your presence in the palace gardens. If you would follow me, please." Zane nodded, straightening his jacket and taking a deep breath. It was time to meet his future wife. As he followed the attendant through the winding corridors of the palace, Zane couldn't help but marvel at the intricate tapestries and shimmering mosaics that adorned the walls. The Xixians were renowned for their artistry, their works imbued with a depth of emotion and meaning that often eluded human understanding. They emerged into a vast, open-air garden, the air heavy with the scent of exotic blooms and the gentle tinkling of wind chimes. And there, standing beside a crystalline fountain, was Princess Xara. She was taller than Zane had expected, her willowy form draped in a flowing gown of shimmering silver. Her skin was a pale lavender, her eyes a striking shade of amber. But it was the aura of quiet strength that emanated from her that truly caught Zane's attention. "Princess Xara," he said, bowing deeply, "it's an honor to finally meet you." Xara regarded him with a curious tilt of her head, her expression unreadable. "The honor is mine, Mr. Axton. I must admit, I was surprised when my father informed me of this arrangement." Zane straightened, meeting her gaze with a wry smile. "Trust me, Your Highness, I was just as surprised. But I understand the importance of this alliance, and I am committed to seeing it through." Farana nodded, a flicker of respect crossing her features. "As am I, Mr. Axton. Our peoples have much to gain from this union." She paused, her eyes searching his face. "I only hope that we can find common ground, despite our differences." Zane held her gaze, a newfound determination settling over him. "I have no doubt that we will, Your Highness. After all, it is our differences that make us stronger together." And with those words, Zane felt a glimmer of hope. Perhaps this arranged marriage was not the burden he had feared, but an opportunity, a chance to forge a bond that would change the course of history. The unorthodox ceremony. The grand hall of the Xixian palace was a sight to behold, its vaulted ceilings adorned with intricate frescoes depicting the history of the Xixian people. Hundreds of guests, both human and Xixian, filled the hall, their voices blending in a cacophony of excitement and anticipation. Zane stood at the altar, his heart pounding in his chest as he watched Xara glide down the aisle. She was a vision in her wedding gown, the iridescent fabric shimmering with every step. As she drew closer, Zane could see the intricate patterns woven into the gown, each one telling a story of Xixian lore. The ceremony itself was a blend of human and Xixian traditions, a symbolic union of two cultures. Zane and Sarah exchanged vows in both English and Xixian, their voices echoing through the hall. Zane stumbled over some of the alien words, his tongue tripping over the unfamiliar syllables, but Sarah merely smiled, her eyes shining with understanding. As the officiant, a venerable Xixian elder, began the final blessings, a sudden commotion erupted at the back of the hall. Heads turned, and gasps rippled through the crowd as a figure pushed his way to the front, his face contorted with rage. "Stop this farce at once," the man shouted, his voice booming through the hall. "This marriage is a sham, a disgrace to both our peoples." Zane stepped forward, his eyes narrowing as he recognized the intruder. Ambassador Rorik, a vocal opponent of the alliance. "Ambassador, this is neither the time nor the place for your objections." Rorik sneered, his gaze darting between Zane and Sarah. "You think this union will bring peace. It will only lead to our ruin. The Xixians cannot be trusted." Murmurs of unease spread through the crowd, and Zane could feel the tension mounting. He glanced at Sarah, expecting to see fear or confusion in her eyes, but instead he found only steely determination. "Ambassador Rorik," Sarah said, her voice calm and clear, "I understand your concerns, but I assure you, this alliance is built on a foundation of trust and mutual respect. My people have no desire for conquest or domination. We seek only to forge a brighter future, together with our human allies." Rorik scoffed, his face twisting with disdain. "You expect us to believe that? Your kind are nothing but deceivers, hiding behind pretty words and false promises." Zane stepped forward, placing himself between Rorik and Sarah. "Enough," he said, his voice ringing with authority. "Ambassador, you are out of line. This alliance has been approved by both the Interstellar Human Alliance and the Xixian High Council. It is not your place to question it." Rorik's face flushed with anger, but before he could retort, a group of Xixian guards appeared, their weapons trained on the ambassador. "Stand down, Ambassador," the lead guard said, his voice firm. "You are disrupting a sacred ceremony and insulting our honored guests. Leave now or face the consequences." For a moment, Rorik looked as if he might argue, but then, with a final glare at Zane and Sarah, he turned and stalked out of the hall, his footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. Zane turned to Sarah, his heart still racing from the confrontation. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I had no idea he would go this far." Sarah placed a hand on his arm, her touch gentle and reassuring. "It's not your fault, Zane. There will always be those who fear change, who cling to old prejudices, but we cannot let them sway us from our path." Zane nodded, a newfound respect for his bride blooming in his chest. "You're right. We will face this together, as partners." The officiant cleared his throat, drawing their attention back to the ceremony. "Shall we continue?" Zane and Sarah exchanged a glance, a silent understanding passing between them. "Yes," they said in unison, their voices strong and unwavering. And so, as the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Zane and Sarah sealed their union with a kiss, a symbol of the bond they would forge, not just between themselves, but between their peoples. It was a moment that would be remembered for generations to come, a turning point in the history of both humans and Xixians. But as they turned to face the cheering crowd, Zane couldn't shake the feeling that their greatest challenges were yet to come. Ambassador Rorik's words echoed in his mind, a warning of the trials that lay ahead. Secrets unveiled. The reception was a blur of music, laughter, and clinking glasses as humans and Xixians alike celebrated the historic union. Zane and Sarah moved through the crowd, accepting congratulations and well wishes, their smiles never wavering despite the weight of the day's events. But beneath the surface, Zane could sense a tension, an undercurrent of unease that permeated the room. He caught snippets of whispered conversations, saw the furtive glances cast in their direction. It seemed that Ambassador Rorik's outburst had stirred up old fears and doubts, leaving many questioning the wisdom of the alliance. As the evening wore on, Zane found himself growing increasingly uneasy. He knew that he and Sarah needed to present a united front, to show their peoples that their bond was unshakable. But the strain of maintaining a facade of perfect harmony was beginning to take its toll. Finally, as the last of the guests began to depart, Sarah turned to Zane, her eyes shadowed with concern. "We need to talk," she said, her voice low and urgent. Zane nodded, allowing her to lead him away from the dwindling crowd and into a secluded alcove. As soon as they were alone, Sarah's shoulders sagged, the weight of the day's events finally catching up with her. "Zane," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "there's something I need to tell you, something that I've been keeping from everyone, even my own people." Zane frowned, a sense of unease settling in his gut. "What is it?" Sarah took a deep breath, her eyes meeting his with a fierce intensity. "I possess certain abilities, Zane, abilities that make me invaluable to my people, but also a target for those who would seek to use me for their own gain." Zane's eyes widened, his mind racing with the implications of her words. "What kind of abilities?" Sarah hesitated, her gaze darting around the alcove as if searching for hidden listeners. "I can't explain it all now, but suffice it to say, I have a connection to the very fabric of the universe. It allows me to see things, to know things, that others cannot." Zane opened his mouth to question her further, but before he could speak, a sudden commotion erupted from the direction of the main hall. Shouts and screams mingled with the sound of shattering glass, and the acrid scent of smoke filled the air. Zara's eyes widened with fear. "They found me," she whispered, her voice trembling. Before Zane could ask who she meant, a group of armed figures burst into the alcove, their weapons trained on Xara. They were dressed in black, their faces obscured by masks, but Zane could tell by their build and stance that they were not Sixian. "Princess Xara," one of the figures said, his voice distorted by a modulator. "You will come with us. Now." Zane stepped in front of Xara, his hand reaching for the ceremonial blade at his hip. "Like hell she will," he growled. The figure laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "You have no idea what you're dealing with, human. Step aside, or suffer the consequences." But Zane held his ground, his eyes narrowing with determination. "I made a vow to protect her, and I intend to keep it." The figure shrugged, raising his weapon. "So be it." What happened next was a blur of motion and chaos. Zane lunged forward, his blade flashing in the dim light of the alcove. He felt the searing heat of a plasma bolt graze his cheek, heard Xara's cry of alarm as she unleashed a blast of energy that sent their attackers flying. And then they were running, their hands clasped tightly as they fled through the winding corridors of the palace, the sound of pursuit echoing behind them. Zane's mind raced with questions, but he pushed them aside, focusing only on the need to survive, to protect the woman who had become his wife, his partner. They burst out of the palace and into the night, the cool air a shock against their skin. Xara led him through the winding streets of the capital, her steps sure and swift, until at last they reached a small, nondescript building on the outskirts of the city. "We'll be safe here, for now," Xara said, ushering him inside. "But we need to plan our next move. Those assassins won't give up easily." Zane nodded, his mind still reeling from the events of the past few hours. "Xara," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "I need you to tell me everything. No more secrets, no more lies. If we're going to survive this, we need to trust each other completely." Xara met his gaze, her eyes shining with a mix of fear and determination. "You're right," she said. "It's time for the truth, no matter the cost." And so, in the dimly lit confines of their temporary sanctuary, Xara began to speak, her words painting a picture of a universe far more complex and dangerous than Zane had ever imagined. It was a story of ancient powers, of hidden enemies, and of a destiny that had brought them together, for better or for worse. As Zane listened, he felt a growing sense of awe and trepidation. He had always known that the universe was vast and mysterious, but he had never imagined the depths of its secrets or the role that he and Sarah would play in unraveling them. The human connection. In the days that followed, Zane and Sarah remained hidden, moving from one safe house to another as they tried to stay one step ahead of their pursuers. It was a tense and exhausting existence, but it also gave them a chance to truly get to know one another, to forge a bond that went beyond the political necessity of their marriage. Zane learned of Sarah's childhood, of the isolation and loneliness she had felt as a result of her unique abilities. He listened as she spoke of her dreams for her people, of her hope that the alliance with humanity would bring about a new era of peace and prosperity. In turn, Zane shared his own story, of growing up on a small colony world, of the struggles and triumphs that had led him to become a diplomat. He spoke of his own hopes and fears, of his desire to make a difference in the universe. As they talked, Zane began to see Tara in a new light. Gone was the cold and aloof princess he had first met, replaced by a woman of warmth and passion, of fierce intelligence and unwavering courage. One evening, as they sat huddled together in a dimly lit room, Tara turned to Zane, her eyes shining with emotion. "You know," she said, "I've always admired humanity, even before I met you." Zane raised an eyebrow, surprised by her admission. "Really? Why?" Sarah smiled, a soft and wistful expression. "Because of your resilience, your adaptability. No matter what the universe throws at you, you always find a way to survive, to thrive. It's a trait that my people could learn from." Zane felt a swell of pride at her words, a newfound appreciation for his own species. "I suppose that's true," he said, "but we couldn't do it alone. We've always relied on our allies, on the strength that comes from unity." Tara nodded, her gaze distant. "That's something I've come to realize too. My abilities may set me apart, but they don't define me. It's my connections to others, to my people and to you, that give me true strength." Zane reached out, taking her hand in his. "We're in this together, Sarah. No matter what happens, I'll always be by your side." Tara squeezed his hand, her touch warm and reassuring. "I know, Zane, and that means more to me than you could ever imagine." In that moment, Zane realized that his feelings for Sarah had grown beyond mere political necessity. He cared for her, not just as a partner, but as a friend, as someone he could trust with his life. And with that trust came a renewed sense of purpose. They couldn't stay hidden forever, couldn't let their enemies win. They needed to find a way to fight back, to uncover the truth behind the assassination attempt and the dark forces that sought to tear them apart. Over the next few days, they pored over the information they had gathered, piecing together the clues that would lead them to their ultimate goal. It was a daunting task, but with each passing hour, Zane felt his resolve growing stronger. Finally, after countless hours of planning and preparation, they were ready. They would return to the capital, would confront the conspirators, and expose their lies for all to see. But as they made their way back to the palace, Zane couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into a trap. He glanced at Sarah, saw the determination etched on her face, and knew that she felt it too. They were taking a risk, perhaps the greatest risk of their lives. But it was a risk they had to take, for the sake of their peoples, for the sake of the future they had dreamed of building together. And so, with a final nod of understanding, they stepped out into the light, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Unity against adversity. The palace was in chaos, the once pristine halls now scared with the signs of battle. Zane and Sarah moved through the corridors, their steps quick and cautious, their senses attuned to any sign of danger. They had expected resistance, had planned for it, but the sheer scale of the opposition they faced was staggering. It seemed that the conspirators had infiltrated every level of the Zixian government, had turned the very people Sarah had sworn to protect against her. But they were not alone. As they made their way deeper into the palace, they were joined by a small but determined group of allies, both human and Zixian. Some were diplomats, others were soldiers, but all were united in their desire to see justice done, to protect the fragile peace they had worked so hard to build. Among them was Ambassador Saren, a former rival of Zane's who had once opposed the alliance with every fiber of his being. But now, faced with the true scope of the conspiracy, he had put aside his doubts and pledged his support to Zane and Sarah. "I was wrong," he said, his voice gruff with emotion. "I let my fear blind me to the truth. But now I see that our only hope lies in unity, in standing together against those who would seek to divide us." Zane clasped the ambassador's hand, a gesture of respect and gratitude. "We're stronger together," he said. "Always." As they approached the throne room, the sounds of battle grew louder, the air thick with the scent of smoke and the crackle of energy weapons. Zane and Sarah exchanged a final glance, a silent promise to stand together, no matter what. And then they were through the doors, into the heart of the chaos. The conspirators were waiting for them, a motley crew of Zixian nobles and military leaders, their faces twisted with hatred and fear. At their head stood Ambassador Rorik, his once pristine robes now stained with the blood of those he had betrayed. "You fools," he snarled, his eyes glinting with madness. "You think you can stop us? We are the future, the only hope for our people." Zane stepped forward, his voice ringing with authority. "No, Ambassador, you are the past, a relic of a time when fear and hatred rule our hearts. But we are the future, a future built on trust, on cooperation, on the strength that comes from our differences." And with those words, the battle began. It was a clash of ideologies, of old hatreds and new hopes, of the past and the future. Zane and Sarah fought side by side, their movements perfectly synchronized, their powers complementing each other in ways they had never imagined possible. Around them, their allies fought with equal determination, humans and Zixians alike united in their common cause. They were outnumbered, outgunned, but they fought with the strength of their convictions, with the knowledge that they were fighting for something greater than themselves. In the end, it was Kara who struck the final blow. With a blast of energy that shook the very foundations of the palace, she sent Rorik and his followers flying, their weapons clattering to the ground in defeat. As the smoke cleared, Zane turned to Xara, his heart swelling with pride and love. "We did it," he whispered, his voice hoarse with exhaustion. "We won." Xara smiled, her eyes shining with tears of joy. "No, Zane, we all did it together, humans and Zixians, united as one." In the days that followed, the true scope of the conspiracy was revealed. It had been a plot years in the making, a desperate attempt by a handful of extremists to seize power and control. But they had underestimated the strength of the alliance, the power of unity. And as Zane and Sarah stood before the cheering crowds, their hands clasped tightly in a gesture of unbreakable bond, they knew that their journey was only beginning. They had faced the greatest challenge of their lives, had emerged stronger and more united than ever before. They were no longer just a human and a Zixian, no longer just a diplomat and a princess. They were something more, something greater. They were a symbol of hope, of the power of love and understanding to conquer even the darkest of fears. And as they looked out at the sea of faces, at the humans and Zixians standing side by side, they knew that their story would be remembered for generations to come. It was a story of courage, of sacrifice, of the unbreakable bonds that unite us all. For in the end, it was not their differences that defined them, but their shared humanity, their common hope for a better tomorrow.